Today we have a crazy revenge story about telling an ex you had a specific disease. We'll get to that shortly. But first, my ex and roommate attempted to poison my dogs. My former roommate. She was not just my roommate, by the way. She was also my ex-girlfriend, and she had bad poop habits. And because many guys call the women they're involved with crazy, it's always difficult for people to believe me until I tell them about the insane, sick thing she did. We met at the hospital where she worked. She was a nurse who worked in the clinical psychology department at the time. My sister, who had been in an abusive relationship, was battling drug addiction. And what do we consider to be schizophrenia? So my mother and I took her to the clinic for a checkup. As we were leaving, I noticed my ex, a tall, red-haired nurse. She wasn't the most attractive person in the room, but she had an interesting face and seemed very pleasant. I remember asking her for directions, but only because I wanted to speak with her. With a sweet smile and voice, she gave me the directions and told me I could always return to her desk if I got lost. I thanked her, and as I was leaving the hospital, I stopped by her desk again and asked for her number. You seem like a fascinating person. I'd love to hang out with you sometime. She entered her phone number into mine, and I noticed her lovely hands. I've always had a thing for beautiful hands, and hers were stunning. We went out twice, and she seemed like a lovely, sweet old lady. I loved it when a woman was ladylike, so that piqued my interest. On our third date, I asked if she wanted to watch a movie together in my home, and she agreed. She arrived earlier than expected and said she was hungry. At the time, I lived in a small house with only cereal and milk in the refrigerator. She made me drive her to the grocery store where we purchased everything we needed. We returned home, and she prepared a lovely dinner for us. We ate, watched a movie, and then spent the rest of the evening talking about college life, our dreams and goals. I fell hard for her. I'm not sure if I was impressed because she went out of her way to prepare food for me, or because she appeared to be so sweet. She let me do the majority of the talking while she listened, as if I were the most interesting person, saying the most interesting thing in the world. I felt deeply seen and respected by her. She also discovered that I had a dog that day, and she has since purchased treats for my dog whenever she visits. Within 2 months, we had decided to be together. We both lived in small spaces, so we decided to rent a larger home. We rented a larger house with 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a large living room, a dining area, and a garage large enough to accommodate both of our cars. It was awesome. In the first month of living together, I began to feel as if I had made a huge mistake. She was very clingy. I enjoy having my woman all over me, but her clinginess was excessive. She never wanted to give me space. I am talking about physical and emotional space. She always wanted me to tell her everything. Even issues involving my family and my sister's health. She would be upset if I visited my mother without her. I needed to let her know what was going on. I just felt like she was being nosy at times. If I got off the phone with my mother, she'd ask what we talked about. Then she'd want a detailed breakdown of everything. My irritability increased rapidly during the second month. I needed some space. I needed time alone with my thoughts, so I started withdrawing. That exacerbated the situation because she suspected I was cheating. She would snoop through my phone and ask me random questions about old female friends, female co-workers, and even female Facebook friends, all of whom she suspected I was sleeping with. One evening, I got home from work and my car wouldn't start. I was frustrated because all I wanted to do was go home, take a shower, and eat whatever hot meal my woman had prepared for me. That was one major benefit of being with her. She always had delicious meals on the table. I ate so well while we were together that when my car refused to start, I gave up and begged a coworker to drive me home. She lived in the same neighborhood as my ex, but we were separated by streets. We got in the car together and started making jokes about various topics and laughing about them. It was all work-related jokes, so it meant nothing. She eventually pulled up in front of our house. I exited and thanked her, then made another joke, which we both laughed about. I had no idea my ex was watching me from the living room window. When I entered the house, she became very angry and began cursing at me. I was too tired to fight or argue. I simply went up to my bedroom, laid down, and fell asleep. Later that evening, she woke me up and invited me down for dinner. I was honestly too scared to eat. I didn't know or even suspect she was going to poison me, but I thought it was strange that she was so angry with me just minutes before, but now she wanted me to come down for dinner. I told her I was fine and did not feel like eating. She then accused me of having no appetite because I had sex with a coworker. I followed her into the kitchen and told her how ridiculous that was. Wouldn't it make me hungry if I did that? It was so ridiculous that I burst into laughter. She didn't find it funny, however. Her expression changed from somber, feminine anger to full-blown rage. She threw a beer can at me and it hit my forehead right after she had done that. She rushed to me and began to cry. I still didn't consider her to be harmful, and I continued to be in a relationship with her. After that day, her behavior deteriorated. She saw the coworker who drove me home at the mall with her husband and informed him that his wife was sleeping with her boyfriend. She also threw things around and was an absolute nutcase. I finally got the courage to tell her I wanted to end our relationship. Surprisingly, she agreed, and we split up. At the time, I had to adopt my sister's dog alongside mine because she had finally agreed to enroll in a rehabilitation center, and I was supposed to care for the dog. My ex, and I decided to stay housemates because we loved where we lived. I moved my dogs into the second bedroom and we lived peacefully for a week. For the first time in months, I experienced peace for a week. I relished the peace. But the week after, my ex went insane. She brought a man home, which was fine with me because we had already ended our relationship, but it was clear that she had done so despite me. The man started living with us. She would make out with him in the kitchen while I was present. And then the strangest thing happened. One evening, she tried to perform things on him in the kitchen, and I was going to tell her to tone it down. I ate from that kitchen, but I chose not to because I didn't want her to think I was jealous or still had feelings for her. When she realized I wasn't bothered by her and her new man, she let him go because he stopped coming around. Later, she began to complain about my dogs, claiming they were loud and constantly entered her bedroom. She reported me to the landlord, and because she was the one who applied for the tenancy, he told her she could kick me out. She couldn't afford to pay rent on her own as long as he paid it at the end of each month, so I stayed. She asked to talk one morning and tried to persuade me to spend the night with her. Honestly, I was disgusted. It was bad enough that she proved to be the most toxic person I'd ever dated. Making out with a guy, and even attempting to perform on him with me in the room, completely turned off any feelings I had for her. I told her I wasn't interested, but she kept touching me, so I shoved her away and went to work. She texted me from the office, saying she was sorry for what had happened and that she just missed me. I believed her apology was genuine, so I told her it was fine, but I didn't want to get back together in any capacity. We agreed to be friends, and she said she was going to go see her sister for a while. She has never done that. I noticed that my dogs were becoming moody and developing small bruises on various parts of their bodies. I didn't get it, but I was also extremely busy at work during that time, so I barely had time to take them to the vet or conduct a thorough investigation. Still, I despised returning home to my depressed dogs. One day, when I returned home, I noticed that one of my dogs appeared completely exhausted. She was struggling. I panicked and worried about the dog I promised to look after for my sister. I was going to take her to the vet early the next morning, but I couldn't sleep, knowing something was wrong with her in the middle of the night. Still in my pajamas, I took both dogs to the vet to be checked. Well, it turned out that my roommate's ex-girlfriend poisoned my dog. The vet discovered a substance in my dog's poop, and I knew right away that she did it. She worked in a hospital and was the only one in the house with access to such resources. The next morning, I made an audio recording on my phone, slipped it into my pocket, and went to confront her about what she had done. She admitted she poisoned my dogs because they bothered her. That's how I found out she gave the same drug to the other dog. She just didn't have any symptoms yet. She was fine with my dogs while we were together. So, how did they suddenly start bothering her? Only after we had broken up, and how is poisoning the dogs a healthy way to deal with being bothered by them? The next day, I emailed the hospital where she worked and told them what she had done. I also saved the recording to a flash drive and sent it to them. She was fired right away because the hospital didn't understand why someone who would try to kill dogs to harm another person should be a nurse. I heard they were working to have her nursing license revoked or suspended, but I'm not sure if they succeeded. I moved out of that house in 4 days. I couldn't imagine living with someone as vile for another day. I stayed at my mother's house until I could find another place to rent. So my question is, why didn't? No, is there anything involving the police here? I mean, report her to her job. Understandable. She works at a hospital. Someone like that shouldn't be around vulnerable people. But why didn't? No, take extra steps to hold her accountable to the law. If this is easily proven, I'm surprised even the vet didn't step in and do something. Wouldn't they have a legal obligation to report something as well? Hello, my name is Steven, and if you enjoy crazy revenge stories, I would appreciate it if you could like or review my podcast. That being said, our next story is that my father believes my boyfriend is in a cult because of his tattoo and is against our relationship. My friends have told me stories about how their parents forbade them from dating someone with tattoos, but I never imagined I'd go through it or have a story to tell about it. I, a 28-year-old female, come from a big family. My parents have 6 children. I am the 4th. We all lived in a large house because my parents wanted to be unique. I wouldn't call it a mansion, but it was a spacious home. Every child had their own space. It was inconvenient for my parents to have to come upstairs every time they needed our help. So we came up with a solution. A family group chat. This was before we moved out. The majority of us have grown up and are no longer living at home, but the group chat has survived and is still used by our parents for meetings. For example, when my older brother unexpectedly married in Vegas without informing my parents, the group chat was used to bring our attention to the situation. It was the same with my younger sister. The 5th child decided to join a strange sorority group where everyone cut their hair bald to prove a point. We all resolved the issue in the group chat by voting. While this was enjoyable, I never imagined that I would be the next topic of discussion in the group because my parents believed I was the most mature of their children and did not need to worry about me. Enough of my family. I should probably tell you how Kyle and I met at work. It was a simple meet and greet at an office party, and my colleague introduced me to Kyle. I was a little skeptical at the time. I had no idea about his tattoos because he was wearing a suit, but I still didn't give it my all. I worked as a secretary at a paper company, where I spent the majority of my days preparing paperwork for my boss, occasionally speaking with clients on his behalf, and managing his schedule. The job was supposed to be a temporary source of income, but it eventually became my full-time job. Kyle was one of the company's major shareholders, and making a move on someone with his status seemed risky, especially since he had a connection to my work, and I didn't want to get involved in a work relationship situation. I politely declined every advance he made, expecting him to give up because he was wealthy and didn't appear bad. He did not. He was persistent and persuasive. I had no option but to give in. It had been a long time since I had been on a date, so I agreed to one, which turned into 2, and 2 became a regular occurrence. Even before we made it official, we knew we were in a relationship. We kept our relationship a secret from the workplace because it could jeopardize my job, and I didn't want to be caught between my relationship and my job. Last Thanksgiving, I invited Kyle over for dinner at my parents' house. This was a regular occurrence for my siblings and me. Everything provided dinner, so the house was always full. My eldest sister, the firstborn, and her husband and children would be present, as would my elder brother, the secondborn, who had recently married in Vegas. My third sister, who came before me, was a workaholic lawyer with an endless supply of excuses. Every year, I miss Thanksgiving while my younger sister, who is in college, and my younger brother, the lastborn, are always available. We could cook dinner as a family and decorate the table to our liking. Everything was going great. I could tell my father liked Kyle. My niece was having a conversation with Kyle when she accidentally spilled a drink on his shirt. I offered him one of my father's shirts and showed him where he could change. We all had a lovely dinner. Even dessert was fantastic. What could go wrong? We ended the night in a beautiful town, and I left with Kyle. The next morning, I received a couple of calls from my siblings asking if I had seen what my father had posted in the group. As usual, my first thought was, who did something wrong? I anxiously opened the group, which was full of messages, and saw my father say something about Kyle being a member of some cult. He was aware of the tattoo on his back. Not only was this ridiculous, but Kyle's tattoo was simply his initials and bold letters tattooed on his back. My father wasn't seeing things that way. My father believes he discovered the symbol while researching my younger sister's sorority. I tried to reassure him that it was nothing serious, just his initials. But my father wasn't having it. He sent pictures to the group, sparking an argument. I couldn't even bring myself to tell Kyle because it seemed absurd. But I did ask him how he got his tattoo, and he said he got it during a drunken truth or dare game. Like any other typical college student, he grew to enjoy it and eventually left. Later that weekend, I went home to tell my father that the tattoo was just his initials and was not suspicious. But my explanations fell on deaf ears. It was then that I realized how serious this situation was to my father. I mean, it didn't seem like a big deal to me or my siblings. Everyone liked Kyle. To be fair, my elder sister, the third-born lawyer, once dated a guy with a tattooed arm, and my parents had no objection. So I didn't see why they thought a small initial was a big deal. I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with my father. I decided to speak with my mother in private. She knew her husband was acting ridiculously, even if she didn't want to see it. When I spoke with her, she remained silent the entire time, saying only that she agreed with my father that there was something suspicious about Kyle. He helped her stuff the turkey for Thanksgiving. What is it about him that makes you suspicious? My siblings found my parents' accusations amusing. They kept assuring my father that there was nothing to be concerned about, but this man's mind was made up. I decided not to give them any attention or audience if they didn't want to accept Kyle for Christmas. I refused to travel home for the holidays. It remained the same for the new year. I ignored their calls and messages and spent time with Kyle. He knew something was wrong with my family, but I didn't tell him what because it was embarrassing and annoying, and I didn't want him to feel ashamed or stereotyped because he had a tattoo. My parents came to visit me in early February. It was a surprise visit. Otherwise, I would not have given them any attention because they were being childish. I quote, "V decided to join them in their childishness." My mother was very sorry about the misunderstanding, but my father was hesitant to apologize. I'm sure my mother forced him to do so, but it didn't matter as long as they accepted Kyle for who he is. I thought the situation had been resolved until my father pompously stated that he had a condition. If Kyle wanted to be a part of my life, he needed to find a way to remove that tattoo. This is when I lost it. I told him that would never happen unless Kyle decided he wanted to do it his way. He had no right to dictate what my boyfriend did with his body. And my father, being the same old stubborn man, said I wasn't ready to reach an agreement as if we were making some sort of bargain. I told him to find his way out because that was never going to happen. And when he is ready to accept Kyle for who he is welcome. My parents left without saying anything, and I assumed that was the end of it. Until Kyle came over one day and said, "My dad called him." I understood what that meant, and I knew Kyle was a simple person. He has always been, and that is one of the qualities that drew me to him. But I expected him to defend himself. But he wasn't even bothered by what my father told him. He agreed to have the tattoo removed because it wasn't a big deal to him, which made me even angrier because it seemed like he was agreeing with my father's ridiculous analogy. I told him that wasn't going to happen and immediately called my father and demanded that he apologize to Kyle, or else I was out of their lives forever. This must have triggered something in my father because the next thing I knew, he was telling my boss that I was having a secret relationship with Kyle in order to break up with him. I was not only disappointed by his pathetic attempt, but also saddened that my father cared so little about my profession. My boss did not make a big deal of it. He just gave me a non-disclosure form to sign, and that was it. I brought up the issue in the group chat and told my siblings and mom about how my father attempted to sabotage my relationship with Kyle, and my siblings accused him of going too far. They demanded that he apologize not only to me, but also to Kyle for his accusations and disrespectful behavior toward him. My siblings decided it was time to bring this matter to a close, and suggested that my father have a one-on-one conversation with Kyle at his home. This seemed like a good idea, because not only would my father catch Kyle off guard, allowing him to see that he had nothing to hide, But he could also see Kyle beyond being a cultist and put the idea out of his mind for good. I sent my father his address and told Kyle nothing about his upcoming visit. After all, this was a surprise visit. The day arrives, and my father and I visit his home. I noticed Kyle's car was not in the driveway, so I knew he was gone, probably at work. I removed the spare key from its usual hiding place and opened the door. This allowed my father to search through every nook and cranny of his house. My father went above and beyond this time, searching the entire house and finding nothing. Not long after, Kyle returned home to find my father and I going through his belongings, and he was furious. He didn't try to hide his rage this time. Kyle was not given the opportunity to hear my side of the story before my father and I were sent away. I felt terrible about doing something like that because I knew better. I could have simply asked for his permission or given him a heads up, but part of me wanted to show my father. My boyfriend was not a psychotic cold guy. He eventually abandoned his claim that he was my father, but Kyle refused to answer any of my father's calls. I ran into him at work last week and we spoke. I explained my side of the story and apologized to him. He and I reconciled and got back together. I've also refused to speak with my father for some reason. I quote, am angry with him and not ready to forgive him. Maybe when I get over my rage at him, but for the time being, I have not contacted him, and I do not intend to do so anytime soon. It's almost frustrating how things seem to keep circling each other from a distance. They eventually, despite OP's incredibly stupid actions, reached a point where the father was willing to concede, and only then did it blow up and he fled. Also, I'm going to stop talking to my father. It's almost like a drama series that needs to ensure the plot can last another season. So things perfectly circle around each other, just outside the realm of understanding, allowing them to remain perfectly fractured for an even longer time. Our next story involves playing a herpes prank on my ex. One of the few things I've learned in life is how to deal with people who keep accusing you of doing something. There is usually a higher likelihood that they are into whatever they keep claiming you are into, which is a twisted version of projecting on someone. It's like when we were younger and tried to instill fear in others to keep them from seeing us for the scared little cat that we are. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? This revenge story is of that nature. But at first, like all of the people we projected onto as children, I couldn't see or accept it for what it was. My name is Colin. I guess you could call me a typical hardworking guy in his mid-20s. There's nothing particularly noteworthy about me, except that I knew how to do my job and didn't slack off like the others. I recently got promoted at work, which was a huge deal for me. I put everything into that job, so it felt good to be recognized. But to be honest, my personal life was disorganized. Thank you to my girlfriend, Candy. Candy, but with an I because that's what she preferred to be called. Candy was something else, stunningly beautiful. Smart. But she could be suspicious and manipulative. She had a way of turning every argument into something that made me look bad. She kept accusing me of cheating, which was ironic given that I had always been faithful to her. Her constant accusations turned our relationship toxic, but I stayed. I was hoping she'd change that. She would realize I was not the enemy. But it wasn't just about Candy and the way she acted. There was Arthur. He was a mutual friend, charming and always around. When Candy needed someone to talk to, I never trusted him. He had this way of getting close to Candy, offering her a shoulder to cry on whenever we fought. People said he was just a harmless flirt, but I knew better. I suspected there was more to his intentions, and it turned out I was right. It all started at a mutual friend's birthday party. Candy and I had been together for a year by then, and things were still pretty good between us. We were enjoying the music and mingling with friends when our host introduced us to Arthur. He was charming right from the start, and I seemed to like him immediately because of the easygoing aura that radiated around him. Arthur was a friend of the birthday boy, someone who had just moved to town. We hit it off pretty quickly. We exchanged numbers, and soon enough, Arthur became a regular part of our social circle. At first, I was glad to have another friend. Arthur was always up for a good time, whether it was grabbing drinks or catching a game. But I noticed he and Candy seemed to have an extra connection. They would joke around a lot and share inside jokes that I wasn't a part of. It didn't bother me too much initially. I trusted Candy and wanted to believe Arthur's intentions were pure. But as the months passed, things started to change. Candy would invite Arthur to join us on our date nights, saying it was more fun with a group. Sometimes she would go out with him alone, insisting they were just friends. Every bit of it just felt really weird and uncomfortable. But I didn't want to be the guy who spoke ill of a new friend, nor did I want to be seen as the jealous, controlling freak boyfriend who didn't want his girlfriend to have other friends aside from him. I started paying more attention. I would see them exchanging glances, or Arthur would touch Candy's arm in a way that felt too familiar, regardless of what I thought. I chose to not be a jerk about it. Turns out that was the greatest mistake I made in that relationship, just before the mistake of letting Arthur into our space. The breakup was brutal. I knew it was coming, but it was still brutal, a crush to my heart. That evening, I got home late from work after a particularly tasking day. It was the day before I was told I got the promotion and was being transferred to another location of the company. As soon as I walked through the door, Candy was waiting for me. Immediately. I saw the look on her face. I could tell that there was bound to be trouble that night. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "At work." "Candy, I told you I had to stay late for a project," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. I tried to be reasonable, despite the fact that I had a long day and was in no mood to go through the whole back and forth. I knew she was headed for that evening. That was not the first time she had accosted me. It was a regular occurrence at that point from a couple of weeks before. Then she began the whole charade of, "Were you with someone else? Is it someone at the office? I know there's something. Just let me know." In that instant, I was done. I was tired of having to explain to her that I was not seeing someone else over and over and over again. So I simply said, "If you want out of the relationship, if you could say so instead of haggling me around and accusing me of cheating." A part of me expected that she would be reasonable and that would make her cut it out. But as it turned out, it was the free pass she needed. She let the waterworks in action like she had planned it all along, and said something about being right and that it was over between us. After her uproar, she went into the room, picked a couple of things, and left the apartment we were sharing. I watched her walk out. My heart was heavy with betrayal and anger. That night, she arrived home even later than usual. Her makeup had smudged and her breath smelled of alcohol. When I heard her approaching, I went out to the living room. "Where were you?" I inquired, my voice trembling with anger. She dismissed it, saying, "Out with friends." "With Arthur." I pressed. "So what if I am?" she snapped. "At least he listens to me." And that was it. She confirmed what I already knew was happening. It was just a ruse to get me where she wanted, and I was too stupid to recognize the whole situation for what it was. Within a few days, she had completely left our apartment. It was as if she had everything planned out for a long time and was just waiting for it to unfold. I quote, "Am not sure which one hurt the most, watching her move out of our house and how quickly she did so." Regardless of the promotion I received the day after my breakup, I felt somewhat empty. I was leaving town in 2 months, and those 2 months were the best technical experience I'd had in a long time. The public displays of affection were difficult to miss. They'd walk down the street holding hands, exchanging intimate glances, and laughing as if nothing else mattered. It was painful to witness. Candy seemed so happy with Arthur, which made me reconsider everything about our relationship. Had she ever truly cared about me, or was Arthur always in the background waiting for his chance? Candy didn't waste any time promoting her new relationship on social media either. Her Instagram was filled with photos of her and Arthur in various locations, including cozy cafes, scenic parks, and even some of the same places we used to visit. Each post felt like a deliberate stab, as if she wanted to erase all traces of our relationship and replace it with her new life with Arthur. She had deleted them from the media and attempted to delete them from memory as well. As time passed, the pain and unanswered questions turned into anger. I could not believe I had let Candy and Arthur make a fool of me. I needed to do something to make them feel some of the pain they'd caused me. During the weeks I had to pack to start my life somewhere else in the world, our other mutual friends began checking in on me, wondering what had happened and expressing surprise that she had moved on so quickly. Of course, some people supported her, either out of loyalty or because they believed her narrative that I was the untrustworthy one. It was a lonely time, full of self-doubt and anger, but I couldn't keep quiet forever. Arthur and I met one night at a local bar, fueled by a combination of alcohol and pent-up frustration. I confronted him. "How long has it been going on?" I demanded. Arthur smirked, clearly unconcerned by my outrage. "Doesn't matter, Colin. She's with me now. Perhaps if you had been a better boyfriend, things would have turned out differently." His words cut deep, but they also strengthened my resolve to move on and live my own life. Seeing Candy with Arthur provided the final push. I needed to leave the past behind and start over. And my promotion was the perfect opportunity to leave and start over. I packed my belongings and moved into a small apartment near my new office. The place wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was far away from all of the memories I had of my relationship with Candy and the aftermath of our breakup. My first few weeks at the new job were hectic. I threw myself into work, taking on challenging projects and learning the ropes. My coworkers were welcoming, and I gradually began to form new friendships. The hectic schedule and new surroundings helped distract me from the bitterness of my past. But it did not remove the gnawing sense of betrayal that I felt throughout the drama. I tried to move on by immersing myself in work and forgetting about her, but it wasn't easy. I remembered something she had said or things she liked to mention whenever I had the opportunity. It seemed stupid, but at that point, I was consumed by the memories. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was unfair that I was the only one left with scars from our relationship. Then a plan came together in the most unexpected way I could have predicted. One night, I sat alone in my apartment scrolling through social media. That's when I saw a photo of Candy and Arthur looking as happy as ever. They were at a restaurant that Candy and I used to frequent. My blood had boiled over and reached its boiling point. She needed to feel pain too. That's when an idea struck me. A seemingly simple plan that has devastating consequences. I remembered hearing a rumor about a guy who got back at his cheating ex by making her believe she had contracted an STD. It was cruel, but at the time, it seemed justified. I took out my phone and left a voicemail without thinking twice. "You might want to get checked. It turns out I have herpes." I paused for a moment, wondering if I was going too far. But the sight of Candy and Arthur's smiling faces propelled me forward. I sent the message and then immediately deactivated the phone line, ensuring she couldn't contact me. It was a low blow, but I wanted her to feel the paranoia, fear, and doubt that she had forced me to endure. I blocked every way she could contact me before she went for a checkup to confirm the false diagnosis I had given her, and I never looked back. So let us be clear. Lying about contracting an STD could be far worse than simply saying herpes. In terms of statistics, I believe, as stated, that more than half of all adults already have it. Not like OB was making them worry about how their life would be forever changed by some lifelong disease that would require them to be on medication for the rest of their lives. But I'm sure it caused some serious paranoia. But with that said, that is all the time we have today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely insane revenge story, watch the video to the left.